Maybe it's because I turned 30 a few months ago, but there's two films that have been sort of haunting me for a while, and that I felt the need to revisit. One is a Japanese Studio Ghibli film, Only Yesterday, released in 1991, about a 27-year-old woman reminiscing about her childhood as she takes a holiday with her family in the countryside. The second film, My Grandfather's Demons, is an animation film from Portugal, released in 2022, about a successful young woman who must return to her home village after the death of her grandfather. Both of these films center the experiences of young women struggling to come to terms with their past. And in both cases, the protagonists go to a rural area to rediscover their true selves. These films were created almost 30 years apart and are from completely different countries and use different animation styles. And yet, in my mind, they are somehow trying to answer similar questions that might be useful for those of us going through a quarter-life crisis. So in this video, I wanted to just have a reflection on some of the themes, why they resonate so much with young women, and why do we feel the need to revisit who we were to finally find out who we are. Let's start with Only Yesterday. Directed by Isao Takahata, it's not as celebrated as other films from Studio Ghibli, but it was a surprising success when it was first released, and it became the highest-grossing Japanese film of 1991. It tells the story of Taiko, a 27-year-old single woman working an office job in Tokyo, where she has lived her whole life, who goes on a vacation to the countryside to help the family of her brother-in-law picking safflower, like she had done the previous year. This time, however, she brings her 10-year-old self along, through memories of her life in the 1960s that keep haunting her throughout her vacation. It's not clear why she's remembering all of this, but she guesses that when she was 10, she went through a caterpillar phase, and she might be going through another one now. During her vacation, Taiko meets a young farmer, Toshio, who starts falling for her, and Taiko eventually starts contemplating changing her life completely to become a farmer's wife. The animation is beautiful, always contrasting Taiko's current life and her childhood, highlighting her struggles and dreams. It's a film of self-discovery and how our present can be influenced by our past and what it can reveal about our authentic selves. If you haven't seen it, it really is a gorgeous animation film, really worth your time, and one that I think you benefit from watching as an adult. Now about My Grandfather's Demons. Although Portuguese animation has been garnering attention lately, as it was the country of honor at the NSC Animation Festival in 2024, and the short film Ice Merchants by a Portuguese young director was nominated for an Academy Award in 2023, you probably have never heard of this film before. Feature animation films produced in Portugal are still few and far between, so My Grandfather's Demons is really a standout, and it was widely acclaimed in animation circles upon its release. It tells the story of Rosa, a successful professional living in a generic big city. She works a lot and doesn't have any time for a real social life. She is immersed in a competitive career, always focused on the next target. She seems to have barely kept in touch with her grandfather, who she grew up with after her mom died. Throughout her life, she seemed to be more interested in going to the city and leaving the village behind. However, once she hears of her grandfather's passing, she returns to the village, initially hoping to sell the land and leave all of the past behind. But, after learning about the vengeful legacy of her grandfather, she decides to rebuild the house and establish new bonds with the village people that her grandfather had cursed for decades, with the help and support of demon-like figurines. Although Rosa and Taiko seem to have very different lives, they experience a similar internal journey coming to terms with their own past and finding out who they truly are. In both films, this journey can be analyzed through three main themes. I think it's interesting that both Taiko and Rosa are young single women living alone. There's a lot of literature and films dealing with the alienation felt by young women with children and husbands, how it made them feel like they're not themselves anymore and are instead living for others, fulfilling a societal role of mother and wife. But the interesting thing about these films is that, following global trends of developed countries, they're focused on the inner struggles of adult, successful women who still feel a certain emptiness. Devoted to their careers and independent, they are still longing for something, even if that something is not traditional roles per se. In My Grandfather's Demons, Rosa's life in the city is explicitly made to seem almost plastic and unremarkable. They employ a kind of generic digital animation for her daily life there, but once she returns to the land of her grandfather and of her childhood, it changes into stop-motion animation, and everything feels much more grounded and authentic. It's handmade, it's human, and imbued with traditional craft. According to the director, Nuno Beato, with this film, I meant to create an identification with a way of life that so many times consumes us, makes us retreat from our most profound being, and pushes us into automatic actions that distance us from the other. In Taiko's case, it's clear she yearns for a more authentic lifestyle that isn't alienated from the traditions and the land. When she speaks with the young farmer Toshio, he explains to her that the nature she is admiring is the product of hard-working farmers. She's marveled by the farm work that would be back-breaking for others, and constantly comments on how much she admires the farmers that came before her, and how much safflower they had to collect for just a speck of rouge, which they wouldn't even be able to afford. She feels sad when she realizes she's only been playing at farm work, that she might not really belong there. She wants to be a part of it, as she says, "My soul was at home here." For Rosa, working on the land is also an important step in her journey to become more connected with herself and others. For example, cooking with vegetables that she planted herself brings her pleasure and a sense of achievement. It's also one way to fix the curses or demons her grandfather left behind. Both films seem to be commenting on the fact that the routine of modern city life fails to bring joy and pushes us towards loneliness, while living surrounded by nature and working on the land inspires us to appreciate the smaller things in life and makes us feel more grateful and alive. Both films employ a lot of flashbacks. In the case of My Grandfather's Demons, these flashbacks are created with the demon standing in for important people in Rosa's life, because the past is painful and is haunted. Nostalgia is defined as a sentimentality for the past, and it's true that Rosa remembers happy moments as a child, but the past also brings a lot of remorse because she recognizes that a lot of mistakes were made, and the difficult temperaments of both herself and her grandfather caused a lot of pain. So most of Rosa's story is permeated by regret. In the case of Taiko, the past is bittersweet, such as the feeling of growing up. Taiko also feels regret for some parts of her past, such as her treatment of an old schoolmate, and whenever she acted as a spoiled child. But most of the time she speaks of the past with tenderness and a lot of empathy for her 10-year-old self. To mark the difference between past and present time, Only Yesterday also employs different animation styles. When Taiko is remembering herself as a young girl, it is done in a traditional anime style and dubbed later, whereas the animation of grown-up Taiko was carefully done after voice recording, so that the expressions and lip movements match the sound, for a more realistic look. The pastel tones of young Taiko and barely sketched background evoke the haziness of memory, but adult Taiko is rich in details, a deliberate decision by Takahata, who wanted audiences even more immersed in the film than they would be for a traditional live-action one. He says, "Live-action films are so common these days that they're becoming a part of the reality. I don't think audiences really watch live-action features carefully. However, they'd be forced to for an anime feature, because anime captures what we do and reflects a more solid reality. It makes people realize what we do every day." When Rosa and Taiko return to the countryside, they are both considered as city girls. In the case of Taiko, the family of her brother-in-law is thankful to have her there, and they're even hoping that she will ditch her city life and marry Toshio. Unlike in the city and in her own family, where Taiko was always considered weird and struggled to fit in, the rural community seems to be grateful for her presence and welcomes her with open arms. Toshio's love for Taiko is like the community embracing her for who she is. In the case of Rosa, her grandfather's bad temper and vengeful character had irreparably damaged the community bonds. In My Grandfather's Demons, the rural life is not full of sunshine and safflower. It's full of stories of betrayal, jealousy, and revenge. And because of that, Rosa's story is one of redemption and generational trauma, where she understands the true value of community and how much hurt her grandfather caused. He hopes from beyond the grave that she can fix his past mistakes, and the film employs mystical elements to communicate to us that her grandfather's spirit is full of regret and wants to help her find the solution to make the community happy again. As the director Nuno Beato stated, Rosa's search is directly connected with taking comfort from others' embrace, to the need for friendship connections, to sharing and to mutual help. We all need others' presence, and the human bonds that grow beyond the pursuit of economic independence and the illusion that it creates for us. For Taiko, finding community means finally being truthful with yourself and following your heart, in true Studio Ghibli style. While for Rosa, it means owning up to your mistakes and healing relationships. Rosa doesn't find love in a farmer like Toshio. In fact, that would probably feel out of touch in the 2020s, but she does have true friends by the end of her journey. In fact, it's interesting that in Taiko's case, she eventually decides to stay in the countryside while Rosa returns to the city, but determined to have a different lifestyle. In the case of Taiko, the idyllic rural life and its community is depicted as the answer for Taiko's longing, but for Rosa, more realistically, it becomes a cherished part of herself, but not everything. It would feel too easy for her to stay. The real work is actually finding a balance between these worlds. So what is the meaning of Taiko and Rosa's stories for young women today? I think they can inspire us to take a break, reflect on our past selves, understand where we might have made mistakes and what our past hopes and dreams were, and not be deceived by what society's version of success is. In an age of influencers and where young people are increasingly glued to their screens, it's important to stop, disconnect, and take the time to really think. If you are going through a quarter-life crisis, the answers you are looking for to craft a better future might be hiding in the past. Don't be consumed by nostalgia though, which is easy when you think back to a life where you didn't have to work and so many responsibilities. Learn to appreciate nature and try to break free from routines that keep you in front of screens. If you are feeling lonely and alienated, remember that it's always worth it to have time for others and strengthen the bonds with your community, whether it is your neighbors, family, or friends. And if your current life is not giving you enough time for any of that, maybe it's time to rethink what your real priorities are, if you have the privilege to do so. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like and subscribe. I got a little discouraged after my last video was basically voted down because it dealt with the legacies of Portuguese colonialism, and it went from being the video with the fastest growing viewership I ever posted to virtually no views overnight. So if you like analysis of animation films mixed with a little bit of history, I'd appreciate it if you could watch it. I hope this video inspired you to watch both of these films, and I'm curious to hear if they've also been useful for you to get over your quarter-life crisis. If so, please leave a comment below to share your experience. Thanks again, and until next time.